Sup, schizos? Asylum stud Ryan Plus here. I've decided to branch out a bit and cover an interesting historical event I found. And the first few seconds are over. Quaker Oats gave autistic children radioactive oatmeal under the guise of a science club at an institute famous for its involvement with the USA's eugenics movement, started by a guy who funded John Brown's terrorist attack on Harper's Ferry. At the beginning of this wacky journey is Samuel Gridley Howe, famous for his abolition activities. His contributions to abolitionism include storming Faneuil Hall and getting a deputy killed in order to rescue the slave Anthony Burns, funding John Brown's attack on Harper's Ferry, and fleeing to Canada to avoid prosecution for funding terrorism, and becoming a prominent member of the Kansas Committee while skirmishes were ongoing during Bleeding Kansas. With this sexy track record, Howe would later go on to fund two major institutions, the New York State Institution for the Blind, and for our malicious chuckles, the Massachusetts School for Idiot and Feeble-Minded Children, later renamed the Walter E. Fernald Institute because some kids' feelings were probably hurt. Walter himself was the school's third superintendent, and under his leadership from 1859 to 1924, the school was viewed as a model in the field of general learning disability, or as you and I know it, mental retardation. Keep in mind, this is what they had before 4chan. Doctors and politicians would often visit the facility to learn the methods employed by the school. The school also led the Templeton Colony, which was a farm made to employ the differently abled. However, while working tirelessly to keep the school running smoothly, Fernald was a staunch supporter of the eugenics movement. Although Fernald did not support forced sterilization, he did advocate that they be segregated from normal society, as he believed they were far more prone to evil than the average person, coining the term defective delinquent. Walter would later change his mind on segregating them. However, the public had already widely accepted the former ideals. Because no matter how compassionate we think we are, if human beings have a choice of being bothered with a moral choice or the choice of making it someone else's problem, they will choose convenience in most cases. And fuck you, yes you would. Later, in the era of 1946 to 53, there would be a superintendent by the name of Clemens Ernst Benda.
I'm not going to say what race, what people doctor, and what hospital, and what media went to. We know I can't say that.
Do not check his early life. Clemens would oversee joint experiments by Harvard, MIT, and Cambridge researchers that saw radioactive isotopes being exposed to the school's tenants. Part of the experiment was sponsored by Quaker Oats in order to get an edge over their competitor Kellogg. What they would do is promise the kids cool things if they agreed to participate in the experiment under the guise of calling it a science club. They would lure the kids into the metaphorical white van with Mickey Mouse watches, parties, and tickets to a Red Sox baseball game, when in reality, all they needed was a cup of grilled cheese. The experiment done, led by MIT researcher Robert S. Harris, studied the absorption of iron and calcium in the body. This is where our radioactive oatmeal comes into play, as radioactive isotopes of iron and calcium were used to measure absorption in the body of the kids as tracers. All 57 Science Club members ate iron and calcium-enriched cereals with radioactive calcium isotopes to measure absorption, which were given either orally or through vein injections. 17 of the boys were given iron supplement shots containing radioisotopes of iron. And, while it sounds sexy, allegedly the highest dose of radiation given was 330 millirem, comparable to a modern dental scan. However, the real crime from these experiments comes from a lack of informed consent, because if I'm a med scientist in the 50s and a bunch of autistic children I have dominion over are right there, informed consent just isn't as sexy to me as a blank check from a corporation. A court case in the 90s prosecuted and got $1.83 million out of MIT and Quaker Oats. Why Harvard and Cambridge were excluded? I have no idea, but props to them for getting away with it. Clemens would later go on to do two more silly things. Firstly, write a book on his studies on the mentally challenged called The Child with Mongolism. And secondly, ran an experiment where he injected kids with trisomy 21, aka Down syndrome, in their thyroid gland in an effort to cure them of their Down syndrome. This never worked, and to the resources I could find, I could not find a source saying Clemens was ever prosecuted for this. So to my knowledge, he got away with it scot-free, and went on to teach at Harvard Medical School. The institute later would continue to operate until it was shut down in 2014, discharging its last resident on November 13th after a prolonged legal battle spanning 2 governor administrations, possibly spurred by the reform lawsuit in 2007. Because it was an institution from the 50s, who knows what other sick shit went on there? Well, I'm gonna tell you. Apparently, the institute itself, even after the legal battles and lands being acquired by the state apparently didn't dispose of confidential patient records at the site and just left them there in violation of the HIPAA, thus ending the convoluted and wacky history of the institute. If you like what you saw, consider subbing for more wacky history vids to come, or the bullshit I call my gaming review videos. If you feel so inclined to fund my metaphorical oatmeal radiation of a channel, consider becoming a Patreon or buying a hat. More content to come, so stay tuned. And as always, thank you all for watching.